Denatured. The story of how Big Pharma tries to destroy nature. Take away the effects of nature. Pharmacy. The word pharma comes from the Greek word poison of a witch. Yes, poison of a witch, pharmacy. But let's take a look at denaturing, taking away nature. Usually this is because of a heat process or some type of a chemical. Let's take a look at the history of the pharmaceutical. And if we go back in time, we're going to be able to see that natural medicine was what worked, and that the willow leaves, ancient men, ancient Egyptians, all over the world found that by scraping a little bit of the willow bark, they could make something that could reduce pain. Here's a willow tree. And this was the first type of aspirin. And even way back with Hippocrates in 400 BC, because it was known in Sumeria, ancient Egypt, ancient Greece. And 400 BC, Hippocrates found that by using the willow bark, or as a tea, or as a powder, that this could be used to reduce fever, reduce pain, headache, inflammation.
Willow bark. None of
because
that.
the white willow bark contains salicin, a chemical found in aspirin. Edward Stone had found in an actual study over 5 years that by taking this powder from the willow, that it had profound effects of reducing headaches.
Cordage. They say if you chew on it, it's supposed to act like an aspirin.
Fast forward in history to 1828, and we have Johann Buchner, who he was able to more isolate this chemical, extract it, and called it salicin.
Tastes pretty bitter.
Chewing the herb or using as a tea was helpful in inflammation and in pain. And this was something that doctors all over the world were using because all the medicines were coming from natural. Doctors had found that all these different herbs contained salicin and could help reduce pain, help reduce fever, inflammation. And now chemistry starts to kick in when Charles Gardhard is able to make an acetyl salicylic acid. Very interesting. So we start to look into synthetic chemistry, and coal tar comes along. In 1856, a young man, William Henry Perkin, he's hired to try to make quinine, try to make the chemical quinine, which is originally come from the Dakota tree. He takes coal tar. He's mixing it around, plays with the coal tar. Coal tar had been invented. They found how to synthesize, how to refine it. And inside the empire, there was a dramatic need for quinine to defeat malaria. Malaria was happening all over the world, and they wanted to make a cheap form of it, synthetic, in the laboratory. Well, he will fail. He will not make quinine. That turned out to be very, very complicated. But what will happen is he will take aniline sulfate with potassium dichromate, and he will mix it together to try to make quinine, but it won't work. It'll make this black, tarry sludge. Now, this is in England, and back then in England, different colors were very difficult to make, okay? So when he did this, he made something. He made the first synthetic dyes, and this is the birth of the synthetic chemistry industry, where he was able to make dyes. And this mauve dye, the first one he was made, is named after the mallow flower. Now, these crude oil chemicals, these pharmaceuticals, they use intense heat and pressure, which denatures the proteins, and then by using different chemical catalysts, they destroy the life. But this starts to kick in, and the first synthetic drug, chlorohydrate, was patented in 1869, and it's introduced as a sedative, hypnotic. This is how you make a Mickey thin. So this is still used today, although it was never FDA registered for its use. this industry starts to develop, and in 1897, Felix Hoffmann will come along and finally be able to patent that aspirin, he calls it. He'll be able to patent that. So he works with the chemistry, makes some other different compounds, and decides to make this aspirin. Very popular, very interesting. Chemical companies are now starting to work. Acetyl for the A and spear for the actual name of the Spirea omaria. And it's often used that in synthetic chemistry that make the name after the plant. This aspirin is patented 1899. Very interesting. And it's used for pain control. This would seem to be the big thing in working with the synthetic chemical companies. In a 2-week period in 1897, Hoffmann synthesized 2 drugs, aspirin for pain and heroin for intense pain. Some people said that aspirin was actually the cause of the 1918 pandemic because of what it did to the immune systems, and that there has some reality to it. That's in a different video. We talk more about that. But as we look into the synthetic chemical companies and their intensity, they were starting to learn about biology and microorganisms, and they were deathly afraid of life. They wanted to make things pure. They wanted to make sure that there was no living entity in their drugs and their synthetics. So they were very keen on the idea of making sure that heat and pressure and denaturization was going to happen, to make sure things were clean and pure. And now that this industry is starting to kick in, and in World War I, just before World War I, there was the war in the Pacific, fought over the saltpeter mines in Chile. Saltpeter, of course, is used in gunpowder. And there's a British ship that was sunk in 1914 during World War I, was fought because of access to the saltpeter mines. The sodium nitrate needed to make bombs. Now, Fritz Haber, Karl Bosch get together, and synthetic chemistry gets a big boom when they're able to really make this saltpeter from ammonia. So all of a sudden, now, we can really go to war when they industrialize the process, the Haber process. And now making gunpowder, making bombs, destroying people's lives becomes more profitable. War, destruction, money, and power start to feed the chemical companies. And they start to get more and more powerful. And then a new weapon comes along, something even more horrendous. Making gas, mustard gas, nerve gas, gas that will kill.
But I think it's going to be terrible.
Haber had made the different saltpeter for the bombs and also participated with mustard gas and the nerve gas, and became the father of chemical warfare. As now a new type of warfare comes out with chemicals, synthetic chemicals that could rip the skin off people, doing horrendous damage. Because the chemical companies don't like life. And this fosters more and more of their ideas. And the chemical companies become very rich and very powerful. And then along comes Fleming. Fleming, who had some very interesting ideas of how to do work in the laboratory. He had some slime drop out of his nose onto a Petri dish, and lo and behold, there was some bacteria. And then he had an old orange sitting up on the table that had developed a mold, penicillin mold. And when he went on vacation one day, that mold fell into the dish with the bacteria. And lo and behold, there was destruction of the bacteria around where the mold had laid. This is the birth of penicillin, because now they found that fungus can help to kill certain bacteria. Bacteria can kill certain viruses. Bacteria can kill fungus. There's a whole balance of the microflora that is happening here. But they all wanted synthetic drugs because they didn't understand life treating life. They only wanted synthetic purity. They started to now make large quantities, and it was developing this process in America where they could now cultivate that penicillin mold in large quantities, large enough to really feed people in the war movement and to help save lives. Lives that they were costing because of the bullets and the gas could now be helped by the penicillin. The lack of understanding about the true chemistry made them look for synthetic answers rather than looking for organic answers. Also, there was an awful lot of profit to be made in synthetics.
This is the sound of a human heart. It will beat 72 times in this minute. Every beat can be a painful throb if you have a headache. This pain remedy is Bufferin, the one doctors recommend by name more often than any other leading brand. Take 2 Bufferin.
And now we have the birth of Big Pharma. Everybody looking for that magic pill. And Big Pharma looking to make money on what they do. Well, one of the first things that they do to make money and make quick money is finding ways to deal with pain and building addiction. Here we have morphine, chloroform, cocaine, heroin, all these things being sold by the drug companies, sold by the druggists. It's amazing, fostering addiction. And asthma cigarettes, not recommended for children under 6. Oh my God. What the hell? But everybody started to look for the magic bullet. Then came the movie.
The story of Louis Pasteur, Anthony Adverse, the life of Emile Zola, and the screen marches onward to ever greater entertainment triumphs. The magic bullet, mankind's strangest weapon, forged in the white fires of one man's courage, recreated by Edward G. Robinson as the rebel genius who defied the world. Now the screen shouts the story the world has never dared to whisper, sweeping you to the staggering heights of a new emotional experience.
This is blackmail. Criminal blackmail. And don't think it ends here.
The first synthetic penicillin. Penicillin was natural. The first synthetic penicillin, patented in 1957.
The social experiment on synthetic drugs has now begun.
Industrialized synthetic pharmacology took in. People were addicted, people were pushed, they were marketed, and doctors were told that they could only sell these type of drugs. All natural medicine products were discouraged, and this spread all over the world. Marketed by movies, marketed by the media, the drug companies found ways to start to really market their products and spoon-feed people the ideas. And now, as most corporations do, big money got into working with the pharmaceuticals and big pharma and corruption. And all about pharma, poison of the witch, and finding ways to market their products and make more and more money as profit becomes now more important than people. And the drug companies' executives look to make more and more. But our story goes on. Because remember aspirin. Well, here, Bayer had sold the name aspirin. But now, 1994, they bought it back for $1 billion. 1994, $1 billion is a lot to pay just for a name. Patent has expired. This is just for the name, the trademarks. Let's look at what happened with television then.
In most of the world, this is a strange sight. It's a TV commercial for a prescription drug. These ads are legal in most countries, but in the US, they're everywhere. On average, 80 of them air every hour on American television.
American television viewers see as much as 16 hours of prescription drug advertising each year. 16 hours. That's more time than most people spend at the movies. The fact is, they invent diseases like social phobia, generalized anxiety disorder to sell mind-altering drugs.
Ask your doctor.
Ask your doctor.
My doctor told me.
Ask your doctor.
The American Medical Association, a major group of doctors, has called for a ban on these direct-to-consumer ads. Before the 1980s, prescription drug commercials were unheard of in the U.S. Drug companies focused their marketing solely on doctors. And
the detail man was somebody who just came out of college, usually with a bachelor's degree in business, and was quickly trained how to detail and tell the doctors what drug that they were supposed to use. But that might not be enough for the drug companies.
was FDA's regulations at the time. They were interpreted as requiring ads to include all the information about the drug's risks and side effects. Which ads didn't have to mention the drug's risks if they also didn't mention the disease or the condition that the drug was supposed to treat.
It's time. It's time.
Don't wait another minute for Claritin.
Claritin. I'll ask my doctor.
It's time to see your doctor.
Mr. Wilkin, the doctor will see you now.
At last, a clear day is here.
The pharmaceutical lobby has a death grip on Congress.
The drug company lobby in 1997 got a law passed that allowed them to go on television and start showing these things and start promoting their drugs. And when they did, all of a sudden, the drug companies started to spend more and more money on advertising. Then they became very, very popular key words. People started to understand what these drugs were, what the drug companies were. They became natural words in the lingo of human beings. Everybody knew what these drugs were and knew what their names were.
Xanax, Celebrex, Flomax, and HGH.
And as of Thursday, Lipitor.
Oh, and if you have trouble sleeping, Milo has Ambien. I prefer Lunesta.
Lipitor, baby aspirin. Flomax.
Flomax? And some Cialis! I'm just assuming.
But there was a secret. The drug companies didn't want anybody to know that some of the different testing failed. A lot of people died just because of drug tests, because there was a big thing that happened with these drugs. That's called side effects. All of these drugs have side effects. You remember our old friend aspirin? Even aspirin has a side effect, destroying lining of the stomach, hurting the brain, Reye's syndrome, all these other different things. Side effects from the drugs. Side effects even from aspirin.
We don't even know all the potential dangers of these drugs because the pharmaceutical industry systematically conceals them. They've been caught buying clinical trials, bribing doctors, distorting science. Many of these so-called peer review articles we see in medical journals are actually ghostwritten by the drug companies themselves.
And if you get a side effect from a drug, well, they have a drug for that side effect. Then they have a drug for the other side effect. They started to see that they could use side effects to sell more drugs. But then another way to make money came up. You found out that antibiotics, when given to animals, chickens, pigs, cows, makes them grow faster. You can get a lot more weight. You can get a fatter pig quicker with antibiotics. So, oh my God, the drug companies had another market way. And all because of patents. With patent medicine, and in order to get a patent, you have to prove that your compound never existed before. So any patented chemical is by definition unnatural, not of nature.
The synthetic pharmaceutical companies have found a brand new market in the meat industry.
A new way to make money.
And a new way to spread chemicals.
But nature fought back. Superbugs came up, resistant to the. After putting antibiotics into the chickens, into the beef, All of a sudden, antibiotics are everywhere. They're spread all throughout the planet, and then nature fought back with the superbugs.
Superbugs are viral infections caused by bacteria that are resistant to common antibiotics. 20% of Danish pork is infected with superbugs called CG398. 12,000 people are contaminated with LA MRSA in Denmark.
And by the year 2050, superbugs could kill
10 million people a year.
Oh my God.
What's irresponsible is we have 3-year-olds on antidepressants. Why? Because the drug companies, just like big tobacco, know that if you get these kids when they're young enough, you have a customer for life.
Vaccines, antibiotics, all of this stuff that they must force on our children. The whole industry is about profit and profit alone. And the doctors are all taught just how to do this. And maybe they ask a question, but it's usually about how much money they're going to make.
Pharmacist, 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 pharmacist. Pharmacist, pharmacist. Drugs. Don't you get it? Drugs help people.
No, Dad. I can't do this anymore. The stuff is unnatural and it doesn't even work. Half the stuff I've been grinding up is sugar pills and the other half is borderline narcotic.
You impertinent little creep!
A history of medicine with good intent, trying to help people, trying to formulate different compounds to help people. But in so doing, they got into mass production, started working for profit rather than for people. Now, this old style of manufacturing that we see here has been modernized, and more money, massive amounts of money, have been developed into the pharmaceutical companies, all based on this idea of patent, unnatural, synthetic, S-I-N, synthetic medications, losing sight of the basic natural instinct of humanity, trying to help the fellow man. It's been gone off and been robbed and twisted into forms of addiction, forms of dependency, to make money for the chemical companies. It's sad, but we now need to take a look at this, because it's been quite some time. And in 1957, when they patented the first real synthetic antibiotic, that synthetic penicillin, over less than 50 years, the social experiment on synthetic drugs is now over. And it has failed. You see, because the actual public have been the guinea pigs. The actual public doesn't really know, because the compounds are not fully tested for their side effects. They're only tested for their efficacy. Side effects are observed in the population. So this can't continue. We have to be able to recognize a new form of medicine, a high-tech. We have to be able to take a look at the work of Erwin Schrödinger, who said that there was a negentropy, something that resisted, a life force that fights against decay and death. This negentropy that fights for order versus disorder. And the laws of death are the laws of entropy.
There is a force in our bodies and all living things that fights against thermodynamic entropy decay. This is our innate life force. Schrödinger said this was negentropy, and he said it was a nutrient. Many cultures prefer fresh and raw diets because it has the nutrient, the negentropy. Negentropy can only be understood as a collection of quantum forces acting in a mega way to maintain and preserve life against thermodynamic decay. Eating life cells of plants and animals thus have benefits and the nutritional quality of negentropy. A fresh and raw diet does make sense, and if you get just 25% of your diet fresh and raw, it will help make you and keep you healthy and wise.
In quantum physics, he had discovered an idea of something that could resist entropy, thermal decay. He called it negentropy, but we best can call it a life force. The idea of what keeps things alive. How does that tiny little seed get a little bit of water, a little bit of dirt, a little bit of sunshine, and grow? The magic. See, this happens in a quantic way, from photons, from the light, in ways that we just don't understand, ways that the chemical companies do not understand at all. The whole idea of how they make these synthetics, S-I-N synthetics, is counter to life. They do not understand the life process. They do not even try to understand. They work against the life process. But it's the magic of life that takes these tiny little seeds, as we can see here, the little seed, and then lets it grow into an incredible plant.
And let
the
it
magic,
expand.
the magic of sunshine, nutrients, interaction,
Light,
quantum physics,
sunshine,
negentropy.
nature.
This is what we need to use in developing a medicine where we can grow our medicine and let the fantastic wonders of nature make the chemicals, which we did for millions of years as human beings. The experiment of the synthetic pharmaceuticals is over, and synthetic pharmaceuticals have failed.
Let's work on expanding nature and life force.
We need a new form of medicine, a form of medicine that treasures life,
What is alive,
fosters life,
perseveres life.
rather than fights against life. We must basically come back to our roots and recognize that food is our best medicine, that all of our medicine should start with food, and that disease starts in the gut when the food is bad and we have different problems within the gut. So by working with food and understanding how to perfect our food supply, nutrition, and how to treasure the life quality and the life force, and get the best out of our foods. And then Mother Nature is a pharmacist. It's basically my pharmacist. And then we can come back to a feeling of growth and farm our medicines, not make them synthetically.